Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are joining us from in the world. As Chair and President of the Chartered Banking Institute, it is my very great pleasure and privilege to be introducing today's virtual conference, the first of two short days focusing on the overarching theme of leadership and embracing digital transformation within the banking sector. This is in fact the 9th time the Chartered Banking Institute has hosted such a conference, but the first time I have hosted this conference since I became the Institute's new president in June. We are once again holding the conference virtually in order to reach as many of our members around the world. I understand we have significant numbers of people joining us today from Africa, Asia, Australasia and Europe, which once again demonstrates the global nature of this conference, and for others joining us around the globe today, you are most welcome. Throughout this conference, we will be looking at how we build the foundations of a responsible banking culture as we navigate AI-driven technology that provides both benefits and risks to the profession. It is, however, appropriate to spend a moment just reflecting on what responsible banking means. Responsible banking refers to the practice of considering the social and environmental impact of banking decisions in addition to financial outcomes. At the Institute, we believe that a responsible banker is someone who possesses a clear understanding of the ethically sound course of action, paying due regard to the interests of the customer and community, treating them fairly, and acting with respect and integrity. At the Institute, we also ensure this core theme of responsible banking is embedded into our qualifications, professional learning, thought leadership, and membership offerings. This supports all professional bankers, including those who have earned chartered banker status, to continue to develop the skills needed to shape a sustainable and responsible future for banking. In other words, we're helping banking professionals support their customers and organisations sustainably in the widest sense. I am sure we will touch on many of these characteristics throughout the course of these 2 days. For those who don't know me already, I have over 35 years experience in financial services, during which time the scale and pace of change has been relentless. No more so than in the space of technology, which has transformed the sector beyond recognition. Nonetheless, banking remains the backbone of the global economy, and alongside emerging and evolving themes such as digital finance and AI and sustainable finance, core banking skills in areas such as credit, lending, risk management and ethics remain key to ensuring the safety and soundness of banks. We have talked for some time now about AI at the Chartered Banking Institute, including at this conference last year, where we focused on its impact on learning, but it still continues to amaze me how AI affects our agenda at the Institute and how it will continue to influence how we will work with our members and partners going forward. For instance, earlier this year, we launched our Certificate in Digital and AI Evolution in Banking, which helps to develop the learner's knowledge of digital, AI and automated banking, and the role of fintech, and now forms part of our new learning pathway designed to help learners reach Associate Chartered Banker status. I'm sure you will have noticed the video we played before the conference started today, and please visit the Institute's website or contact my Institute colleagues if you wish to find out more. Today, we will look at navigating the bank of the future and how having a responsible banking culture interconnects with that process. I'm looking forward, therefore, to hearing from our speakers and panelists about how banking leaders are steering their organisations through these changes, the challenges they are facing and the cultures they are instilling, bringing in important themes of professionalism, expertise and community to outline their strategies and approaches. Our speakers and panelists today will be looking under the bonnet to see whether banking leaders have the right focus and skills to successfully navigate through the next few years, where technology will undoubtedly continue to dominate many board and exco agendas. Now, for those viewers who may not already be aware, the Chartered Banking Institute was founded in 1875. Next year, we will of course be celebrating our 150th anniversary of educating bankers, and with a network of over 35,000 professional bankers around the globe, we continue to champion the qualities and behaviours needed for responsible professional bankers, enhancing education in banking by promoting high professional standards and ethical conduct among our members, whilst improving their knowledge and skills by setting educational standards through examination and certification. The Institute also collaborates with other organisations to achieve common goals, both nationally and internationally, which represent banking professionalism in the public interest, and I'd like to use this opportunity to briefly touch on some of those partnerships. Firstly, our work in supporting how banking can play its part in meeting the environmental challenges that the world faces led to the development of a unique global academy, known as the Principles for Responsible Banking Academy, or PRB Academy for short, with the United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative. The PRB Academy celebrated its second anniversary last week, and it is providing professional training for banks and their staff on sustainability and social issues, framed in the context of the UN Principles for Responsible Banking and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The objective of the PRB Academy is to give all bankers, regardless of career level or expertise, the tools needed to apply a sustainability lens to their professional practice. Alongside this, the international influence and collaboration we have been building through our partnerships with professional bodies in Africa, Australia, the Bahamas, Hong Kong, India, Ireland, Malaysia, Malta, New Zealand, Pakistan, and Taiwan, to name just a few, has been continued focus of the Institute. We are now proud to have both students and professionally qualified members in over 100 countries across 6 continents, all of whom share a common commitment to the Chartered Banker Code of Professional Conduct and to our global family of members. It is great to have so many of you able to join us online today for this conference, and thank you once again for your invaluable contribution to making the Institute such an important community. I would particularly like to pay tribute to our international partner institute, AICB in Malaysia, to also thank the Global Ethical Finance Initiative, better known as GEFI, and last but not least, UNEPFI, in particular, for supporting this event for the next 2 days, and give a warm welcome to all their members and all those associated with them for joining us today. It is partnerships like this that underline the strength of our banking community, and long may it continue. Events of the past 15 years, let alone the last 35 years I have been working in financial services, have taught us all a lot about responsibility, whether in adapting to changes in how and where we work, how we serve our customers, the communities we operate in, and the wider needs of a society brought together whilst physically apart. That is why we are hoping that this conference can draw together the challenges of building sustainable and responsible banking models with the opportunities and threats that major technological changes present, and interpreting what that means for banks, bankers, and society. We absolutely believe it is our Institute's role to share best practice across our global community of bankers, helping our members understand how they can apply the principles for responsible banking in their work life, what tools they can use, and at a time when customers' expectations and demands are changing, we want to enable our members to develop the skills and knowledge to support their customers. Stewardship is the word our founders would have used almost 150 years ago. Today, we would interpret stewardship as being responsible and sustainable. As we look ahead, responsible banking needs to be led by professional bankers, and we need to ensure that the future of banking is one that reflects and celebrates the diversity of our world. We live in a global community, and it is absolutely right that we look outwards and face into the challenges that arise from economic uncertainty, geopolitical events, as well as climate change and the impacts of AI. And the roles that bankers can play in meeting these unprecedented challenges to our sector, but also to the world in which we and our families live. And these are areas that I'm sure we will touch on a few occasions throughout the course of these next 2 days. So please sit back with a coffee or whatever drink takes your fancy at this time of day, and enjoy what should be 2 very enjoyable, thought-provoking days, looking at the challenges and opportunities AI-driven technology is presenting to banks and bankers. In a moment, we will hear from our keynote speaker, Edward Ling, Chief Executive at the Asian Institute of Chartered Bankers. And tomorrow we have two great panel sessions lined up. But this morning's topic for debate is navigating the bank of the future today. So I would like to thank you all for listening, and I'd now like to hand over to our keynote speaker, Edward Ling. Edward, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning or afternoon to our global audience, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I would like to begin by commending the Chartered Banker Institute for their outstanding efforts in organizing the annual banking conference. AICB has proudly supported this event for many years, and today I'm honored to deliver the keynote address. So thank you again for this kind invitation. As we navigate a rapidly changing global banking landscape, it becomes clear that the only constant is change. The theme Optimizing Banking in a Digital Age, People, Professionalism and Technology is particularly timely as artificial intelligence and generative AI reshape our industry, underscoring the need for banks to embrace innovation while upholding the highest standards of professionalism. I would like to begin by addressing two impactful quotes. Jane Fraser, CEO of Citigroup, says that as we navigate the digital landscape, we must prioritize professionalism and ethics, ensuring that technology serves our clients and communities. Closer to Asia, Piyush Gupta, former CEO of DBS Bank Singapore, reminds us, innovation in banking is not merely about adopting new technologies. It's about creating an ecosystem where people can thrive. These insights highlight that digital transformation is fundamentally about people and the values that guide us, and that the human element remains the core of our work. Now, allow me to share some thoughts on these three imperatives: people, professionalism, and technology. Let me start with people. At the heart of every successful financial institution is its people. A recent Deloitte report reviews organizations that prioritize employee engagement can achieve up to 21% higher profitability. As we continue to embrace digital technology, investing in talent development is not optional. It is essential for navigating new technologies and ensuring sustainable growth. Capacity building is no longer just an option for organizations. It is an industry imperative. The banking workforce needs to keep up with the pace of innovation and technological advancements to remain ahead of the curve. According to the Future of Jobs Report 2023 by the World Economic Forum, estimates show that by 2027, 44% of workers' core skills will be disrupted and 6 in 10 workers will require training, but only half have access to adequate training opportunities. To bridge this skills gap, leaders need to adopt a culture of continuous learning and ensure that employees have access to necessary training they need. This will be crucial for bankers to stay relevant and thrive in the rapidly evolving banking landscape while contributing positively to the industry and society. At AICB, we recognize that skills as an accelerator are crucial for financial sector to successfully transition into the future. And of course, the importance of continuing professional development. Our collaboration with esteemed partners like the Institute and others empowers us to continue advocating for ethical professionalism through the Chartered Banker and related sustainable finance and digital programs to cultivate a long-term talent pipeline equipped with these indispensable qualities and capabilities. I am also proud to share that we recently launched the first National Future Skills Framework, the FSF, an industry initiative led by AICB to future-proof the Malaysian financial sector's workforce. It identifies 159 job roles and 157 skills, promoting frontier technologies, Islamic finance, sustainability, and beyond, skills that are crucial for the next 3 years. A wide spectrum of stakeholders, including financial sector employees, employers, students, professional bodies, training providers, government agencies, stand to benefit from the FSF, which signifies a concerted industry initiative to foster a more future-ready workforce, raise the bar on professional excellence, and advance the growth of the financial industry in Malaysia. Here, I would like to emphasize the critical importance of upskilling and reskilling in today's environment. Organizations must realize that by investing in employees' development, they enhance job satisfaction, boost productivity, and foster a culture of innovation. This commitment not only benefits the workforce across all generations, but also improves retention, ultimately driving success for financial institutions. As a professional body, we are pleased to be able to contribute to this important agenda in Malaysia. Building a pipeline of professional bankers who are competent, professional, and inspiring confidence contributes to a sustainable and reputable banking industry, which is so critical to financial stability. AICB has grown our membership by 9% in the last 5 years and certified over 38,000 members to date, demonstrating our commitment to professional development in Malaysia and the region. The second area is professionalism. While there are many interpretations of professionalism, I would like to define it in this context as the commitment to acting with integrity, ethics, and fairness. In an age dominated by algorithms, there are endless exciting opportunities for innovation alongside serious ethical challenges that necessitate our thoughtful engagement and good judgment. We must be reminded that principles of professionalism and especially trust remain vital in these times. They are the cornerstones of banking, strengthen public trust, and should underpin the organizational strategies of all financial institutions. Recent research reveals that trust and ethics are essential to our success, highlighting that ethical banks not only gain customer loyalty, but also experience better financial outcomes. A 2021 Edelman study revealed that 86% of consumers would not buy from a brand they do not trust. A PwC survey found that 88% of consumers are more likely to choose a financial institution that aligns with their values. And a study published in the Journal of Business Ethics found that companies with strong ethical practices outperform their peers financially. As we look to the future, we must also consider the values of the emerging Gen Z demographic that will form 27% of the workforce by 2025. It is a generation that values leadership, ethics, and purpose above profit, much more profoundly than prior generations. Research from Deloitte indicates that 71% of Gen Z consumers prefer to engage with brands that demonstrate ethical practices. As this generation continues to grow, their values will increasingly shape the banking landscape. So as leaders, it is our best interest to place professionalism in banking high on the corporate agenda. And as we are witnessing the ESG agenda becoming central to mainstream banking, it is reassuring to see that prioritizing people, the planet, and purpose over profit is gaining traction and being taken seriously. Now to address the final area, technology. Ladies and gentlemen, today we find ourselves at a pivotal intersection of tradition and innovation in banking. With the rise of open banking, decentralized finance, and groundbreaking innovations like generative AI and cloud computing, we have unprecedented opportunities to optimize our operations, enhance customer experiences, and innovate in ways that allow us to understand our clients better, and tailor our services to their unique need. To draw from the wisdom of a British naturalist, Charles Darwin, innovation is the key to survival. Embracing advanced technologies and innovation has become a strategic necessity, driving growth and competitiveness. According to a Juniper research, spending on generative AI in banking is projected to surge from $6 billion in 2024 to $85 billion by 2030, reflecting our industry's commitment to technological advancement. As we adopt these transformative technologies and seize these opportunities, we must remain vigilant in addressing the challenges and associated risk. Robust guardrails and governance of frameworks must be established to build resilience within financial institutions. Banks may also need to rethink their risk and governance frameworks and implement new controls to ensure effective management and oversight. I am of the view that when technology becomes a core component of the risk management strategies, banks will be in a position to better protect their institutions, serve their customers, and improve their overall integrity and resilience. Additionally, continuous learning and training are also vital in equipping financial practitioners with the latest knowledge and skills on digital advancement and emerging technologies. Professional bodies globally, including AICB, are also exploring and leveraging AI to create adaptive learning platforms that tailor educational content to individual learning styles and needs, making the professional learning process more effective and interesting. Collaboration and knowledge sharing are vital for our success, and conferences like this provide an invaluable platform for us to connect, exchange ideas, and learn from industry experts on how technology can help us stay ahead of the curve in the modern banking environment. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my address, allow me to share these final reflections. Firstly, build expertise by investing in banking workforce. The greatest asset any organization has is people, and bankers who are given the training, development, and support they need to build their expertise and knowledge will become highly qualified professionals with competitive advantage. And this yields significant benefits for the banking industry. Secondly, professionalism is the cornerstone of the banking industry. As the digital age unfolds, the banking landscape will become increasingly complex, with financial institutions having to balance technological advancements with a commitment to ethical practices and the highest of professional standards. Let us commit to cultivating a culture of ethical professionalism across the board to build trust, enhance the industry reputation, and ensure high standards of compliance. Finally, technology. To quote Albert Einstein, the real problem is in the hearts and minds of men. Technology is an enabler, but it is human intelligence that truly drives progress. I trust that you will find the upcoming discussions most illuminating and be further inspired to build a community of bankers with the expertise to address current and future challenges of this digital era, and the highest standards of conduct and ethical professionalism. The future of banking lies in the harmonious interplay of human ingenuity, technological advancement, and unwavering professionalism. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to hand over to today's chair, Eric Lindis, Managing Director of Personal Finance and Prudential Reporting and Taxation at UK Finance. Thank you and have an enjoyable conference.
Thank you, Edward. That was a fascinating introduction to the annual banking conference in 2024. We have a superb range of speakers lined up to perhaps take us through some of the more detailed people considerations that that are integral, as Edward has reminded us, to the development of IT. And if I may, I'd like to start by introducing the panel. First, can I suggest that, where should we go first? Tanya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Morning, Eric. Thank you very much. Absolutely delighted to be here this morning. My name is Tanya Retta. I'm the Executive Director of Education at the Chartered Banker Institute. So very, very pleased to be part of the panel today. And my team and I really work on creating that educational content that's really necessary to support the professionalism and development of our banking professionals.
Thanks, Tanya. Bongi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, everybody. I too am honored to be here. My name is Bongi Mbelu. I'm the executive head for e-commerce for personal and private banking clients at Standard Bank South Africa. My career has always been about tech and digital, and I'm quite excited to have this conversation, which actually speaks more around people who lay the foundation for the success of some of the cool, shiny, innovative stuff. So thank you very much for having me.
And Carol?
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, everybody. My name's Carol Lazell. I work for Barclays UK. I've got 35 years experience in financial services and more recently in some technology companies as well. So my role at Barclays, I lead half of the branch network. That includes over 3,000 colleagues out in our branches, out in our communities, in our touch points and our vans, and also on our telephones as well. What a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Carol. And last but not least, Jason.
Hi there, Eric. Hi, everyone. Absolute pleasure to join you today. My name's Jason Reynolds. I'm the head of people capability in the UK for HSBC, which means it's my responsibility to look after the learning and development and talent development of all of the employees that we've got in the UK. So absolutely delighted to join you today.
Thanks, Jason. I should just issue a bit of a health warning. Unfortunately, as we're speaking, I'm getting intermittent messages that my internet connectivity isn't very stable. So do please, as the audience, indulge us if there are any technical glitches. Let's press straight on, though. Jason, I'd be very interested to understand what does today's bank look like from the employee's perspective, particularly in this digital era?
It's a great question. And I think from the introductions that we heard from keynote speakers, I think we understand that banks have been transformed over the last few decades by all sorts of mega trends of whether it's technology advancements, demographic change, geopolitical uncertainty, notwithstanding also the race to net zero, and customer expectations have shifted enormously, and that really drives the need for a different type of high-level skill and technical expertise and professionalism across the banking sector. We also know that the competitive landscape has also changed significantly. And when I speak to colleagues, whether it's within my own organisation or across the industry, I know that all of that can feel hugely disorientating for them. You know, and it could be maybe that the role that they were heading towards has changed. Maybe it's disappeared completely. I think for others, they're hearing lots about future skills, but their role has not and will not suddenly change. And that can be challenging to understand. How do I, as an individual, future-proof myself? We've already heard about the kind of huge change in the analysis shows that 1 in around 8 jobs in UK financial services is now tech-centric, which is double the proportion compared to the wider economy. And look, it's really important that we focus on those technical skills, but they need to be combined with interpersonal skills and behaviours, as well as the need for continued expertise in the fundamentals of financial services. You know, some of the key interpersonal skills that are needed, you know, are grounded in things like empathy, relationship management, adaptability, and resilience, and can be bundled up as a growth mindset. You know, with the advancement of AI, it's a hugely exciting time. But I heard a quote the other week, and it kind of really struck me as to the importance of some of these interpersonal skills. You know, and it was really talking about the difference between intelligence and wisdom. You know, and the quote was that intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And I think for me, that really sort of said, look, we're going to be able to offer customers within the kind of the banking sector some really great services, but actually it's going to be delivered by humans with that level of wisdom. But it's not easy. You know, we start thinking about how do you create these reskilling corridors, you know, future workforce planning, understanding the skills on the increase or decrease. How do we really deliver great skills assessments, understand proficiency or propensity for people to learn these new skills? You know, the need to become a skills-based organization, which is something that I talk a lot about and hear a lot across the industry, is deeper than just learning and development. It impacts how we hire, how we develop, how we recognize and reward colleagues. And of course, we need excellent leaders to help navigate through all of that transformation.
Jason, that's super. I wonder actually if you just pick up on that theme of leadership. Bongi, you strike me as someone who knows not to put the wrong fruit in a fruit salad. Perhaps you could help us with how you see professionalism in banking and how that has changed, especially considering some of the more responsible banking practices and the changes in legislation and regulation we've seen.
Absolutely. You have a lot of faith in me, Eric. I may try it and see what happens. Yeah, I echo a lot of Jason's sentiments. I think from an employee's perspective, the world, you know, from an ecosystem, from the technologies we use, from the way we learn has evolved quite a bit, but also the way we interact with each other, the way we problem solved has evolved quite a bit in order to solve human problems using technology. That means you need to understand humans quite a lot. So there's been quite a big emphasis on understanding client behavior, being on the ground, including leaders, thinking of ourselves as ecosystems rather than, you know, silos of people doing work, going home, and that being the end of it. Ways of work that encourage collaboration and just working together to bring in different points of view. So I definitely love his thoughts on that. I think professionalism has evolved to challenge leaders a little bit more. And not to say that it's shifted from one thing to the next. It's more around adding more to the pot of what we expect from leaders. More than just, you know, kind of technical policies and regulation. We're expected to be a little bit more proactive in anticipating what could potentially be the impact of certain choices, and then trying to instill that level of proactiveness to our teams. Sometimes being a leader, you know, has evolved more from, okay, we're just trying to get results. Typically, the leader has all the answers. You know, maybe we're focusing on process efficiency and things like that. And now we're expected to be visionaries and, you know, encourage pioneering and thinking outside of the box and being innovators, which means we need to learn as fast, if maybe not faster, than a lot of the things that we see around us. That means we need to model the behavior we expect, you know, our teams to portray. So it's shifted. One of my favorite leaders speaks a lot about ambidexterity. We have to be ambidextrous. We still need to focus on leveraging technology, leveraging innovation to help us achieve better results, you know, big milestones. But at the same time, we have to be human-centered. And there's probably been a lot more emphasis on the people who are building and talking to clients and all of that. And more often than not, leaders are not the smartest people in the room. And that's great. We lead a lot of smart people and we need to encourage that. So then our jobs is to support and enable the human being, and maybe challenge them a little bit more in achieving what maybe they don't think they can achieve today. So yeah, if I were to summarize it, I'd say it's probably a little bit of writing with your left and your right hand, and balancing innovation, business growth, financial growth, but also the human who's helping you get there.
Thanks, Bongi. That's super. Carol, in your long career, how would you see that professionalism has evolved from your perspective? I think when we both started, computers were often sort of something in the corner of the room rather than integral. So as I say, I'll be very interested in your take as to how we integrate both the technology but sustain the professionalism. I think Edward mentioned that as well earlier.
God, you make me sound really old, Eric. And thinking back, it was microfiche back in the day when I first started. For those that you might have to Google what a microfiche is for our younger audio members there. But yeah, so I think the professionalism point is really, because the professionalism, you can look at it from two ways. So you've got the regulation, and obviously we are surrounded by regulation every single day, and that's there for a good thing, right? Regulation is there to protect the consumer, to protect customers and clients. Consumer duty, the new regulation within the UK recently, I think has been brilliant. It's really helped with those responsible banking practices. And then you've got the other side of it, which Bongi was talking about in terms of the role of the leader to make sure that we're adhering to that. But every single day we're trapped in tensions. And what I mean by that is, on one hand, I've got a need as a leader to sort of identify and mitigate risks in change. But on the other hand, I need to identify and seize opportunities in change. So how do you get that balance? And I think the culture that you create within those, the guardrails of those banking practices and consumer duty and regulations is really, really important, and the role of the leader in that is also. So for me, it's about how do you create psychological safety, making sure that people feel that it's safe to speak up, people calling out when they do see bad practices, that they are foreseeing what those risks are. And I think another huge step forward, which I've certainly seen over my career from when I started, is that diversity. I think the more diversity that we can get within our teams has only enhanced not only our professionalism, but enhanced customer experience, making sure we're getting the right outcomes for our customers. That has been absolutely fundamental. And I'm not just talking about your traditional diversity in terms of gender and race, diversity of thought, people from different backgrounds with different upbringings, different education. That's only really helped in terms of professionalism, to be able to see things from different perspectives, and making sure that we're delivering those right outcomes for consumers and for customers, full stop. So I think the culture is where the professionalism has really stepped up, particularly from when I started back in the late 80s.
Thanks, Carol. Just before I bring you in, Tanya, I'd just like to come back to you, Bongi, on this point about leadership and emerging technologies. So I think it'd be really interesting to the audience to understand where you see the role of leadership relative to the adoption, perhaps, and potentially rejection of certain emerging technologies.
Oh, I love the part around rejection of emerging technologies, because I think one of the roles of leaders is also saying what we'll say no to, right? So that we don't get pulled into many different directions because it's popular, it's going viral, everybody's using it, it promises billions and billions of rands or whatever. I think as leaders, it starts by creating the environment for what the future could potentially look like. And you know, when I mentioned human centricity earlier, that includes the leader. You know, everybody looks at what the leader does and how they conduct themselves. So I think it starts with leaders embracing different ideas of what the future could look like. information, content, innovation, just they themselves building kind of a learning agility that makes it okay to say, I actually don't know the answer, I'm going to go find out. That contributes towards psychological safety that says, okay, it's okay to not have the answer and do the work to go find it out. Creating an environment where people can experiment with different ideas, emphasizing the importance of being data-driven. Innovation only matters when it solves a problem. Some of the biggest, fanciest, leapfrogging technologies in Africa were solving real problems around access and inclusivity, whether it's financial inclusion or otherwise, or access to information or whatever. So I think as a leader, you set the scene for how you want to use technology and innovation, whatever it may look like in future, as an enabler. So purpose becomes really important, doubling down on values around what we stand for and what we do not, which creates the framework for everybody in your team to know that, yeah, we're not going to do that because, you know, we have XYZ context in our environment. You know, I was chatting to a friend and we were talking about AI and everybody's talking about, oh, it's going to replace people. And it's like, yeah, probably not in the way you think, because we have high unemployment rates in the African continent. There's no way that that's going to be, you know, the angle for a lot of true purpose-led organizations. The work may change, that's okay, but it may inspire different types of skills and thinking and leading people. So I think our role as leaders is to embrace not having the answer today, doubling down on what matters, on purpose, on values, so that when we start to use these enablers, they're actually helping us to be better, rather than derailing, you know, our direction to a place where it starts to create questions around what organizations stand for.
Thanks. And it's fascinating, isn't it? Because actually so much of this really depends on shared learning. Certainly, I think, Tanya, if I could bring you in, just as an example, if you think of M-Pesa 10, 15 years ago, money transmission, a simple low-value payments mechanism across Africa, phenomenally successful. If you think of PayM, I would imagine that a lot in the audience don't even recognize PayM, which was an equivalent in the UK, but never really took off. So I think, Bongi, it's a very valid point to make sure that the leadership is finding out where and how to back the winners. But Tanya, thinking of communities, how do you feel that communities and networks can support with the development of understanding around technologies and their application to banking and business?
Yeah, and I think it's a great follow-up question, because we've heard a lot this morning, right from the very start, with Paul talking about strong partnerships and working together, and Bongi now talking about ensuring that as we're bringing through that culture of empowerment and innovation and thinking, led by some servant leadership as well as provision of support and challenge, actually helping our bankers and our therefore communities of teams really bring to the fore their own innovative thinking and creativity is hugely important to share right across the industry. Whether you are working in Africa, whether you're working in the UK, whether you're working in Australia, we'll all be at different stages of development, of understanding how do we lead culturally and how do we bring the best of our people out to help them every day think about the way in which their insights and experiences can help navigate this sometimes really complex, difficult regulatory environment. Carol talked a little bit earlier on around the need for professionalism because of heavy regulation. We do have huge similarities and common challenges, and actually working together in a way that actually brings together supportive, innovative ideas really starts to bring the best of our people and the best of the industry. That, let's not forget, is really where we want to be for society, supporting that responsible banking for our consumers and actually leading them professionally. So yes, absolutely. Communities, I'm sure many around this table and listening online have been involved in really strong communities of practice and places where we can start to bring people together with common challenge, common knowledge, but also that real desire culturally to build empowerment for innovation and networking, helps to strengthen those professional relationships in a non-competitive way, but also helps to lead to those broader collaborations and partnerships that benefit each other as well as society. That broadening of innovation really helps to challenge the boundaries. Eric, you've just described there a couple of great ideas, and that comes with actually working with technology. You know, if you go back sort of 20 years, banks didn't work with technology companies. Banks now see themselves more and more as fintechs, more so than banking. And actually, that's all about drawing together the wider community to think about how do we use technology supercharged with humans, great people, to help ensure that it's done transparently, to make sure it's still fostering trust and reputation through the industry of banking for our consumers, and making sure customers benefit by getting those great outcomes. And you know, if you think about the way in which we do that simply, through the onset of the pandemic a few years ago, very simply, we connected far better, starting to use just technology through platforms. So just the use of platforms, just being able to see one another, talk to one another all the time. We've continued to use simple connectivity means to stretch right across the globe in broadening our community and understanding the best practices. And at the same time, equally, if we start to think about some of the ways in which those industry bodies support, certainly in the Institute, we see this common theme of people wanting to get together and sharing great ideas, leading into different ways and different practices to actually improve their own development, their professionalism, and their responsible attitude and culture development towards banking. So really important we foster this great empowerment in our teams that we have, and also think about how these super technologies can help it, whether it's working as a fintech or whether it's using some simple means of just sharing data and best practice. I hope that answers the question a bit, Eric.
Yeah, look, that's really helpful. And I think I'd like to just turn back to the leadership point. Bongi mentioned the purpose-led organization that would consider the environment in which it might want to apply emerging technology, specifically around the question of whether AI should replace jobs or whether it should augment or change the roles that individuals might undertake. And that throws out quite an interesting ethical question. And, you know, in a medical analogy, you know, I think we quite often challenge ourselves and the medical profession. Just because we can, does that necessarily mean that we should? So, Jason, I'm just sort of wondering how one goes about developing more ethical leadership in organizations, and perhaps particularly around big questions, the macro questions such as application of AI and technology.
Yeah, absolutely a great question. And I think Carol and Bongi have kind of drawn out some of the themes around that. And I like to think of it really as an extension of some of the interpersonal skills that I mentioned earlier. You know, ethical leadership relies most heavily on trust. And the leader's intent and integrity is really understood. And I think it's crucial that both customers and employees trust the decisions that are made. You know, and I think I think when you're thinking about ethical leadership and you're talking about purpose and you're talking about creating that culture, one of the thoughts that I often have is, you know, how are we attracting future employees to the industry? You know, how we behave is in public, it's seen, you know, so it's not only to serve our customers foremost and our employees, but it's also to think about how are we attracting new talent to the industry. You know, we've talked leaders need to cultivate an environment of psychological safety. Carol was talking about it earlier, particularly enabling that ability for individuals to do the right thing for colleagues and customers, even when it's tough. You know, and I think, you know, if we just sort of think about trust for a second, you know, you can look at various models of trust. I think one of my favorites is really trust is born out of two things. It's born out of your character and it's born out of your competence. And your competence is your capabilities and your skill and your track record, but your character is your intent and your integrity. And one of the things I spend a lot of time talking to leaders about is, whilst both of those things are really important, actually it's your character that will be more powerful. You can be the most capable leader in the industry with a great track record, but if your character, if your intent and integrity isn't fully understood, that will undermine you. By the same token, you can have, if your intent and integrity is really understood, people will forgive you for mistakes that you make along the way. And I think, so ethical leaders create a culture of transparency and inclusion. Again, we've heard that before. I think that they need to remember that there's a level of consistency. As a leader, you are always on. Everything is there. I've seen some great leaders present on stage and been really inspiring and step off stage and then say something really dumb. Not thinking that, oh, that won't matter because I'm off the stage now. I think as leaders, you have to understand you are always on. You are always broadcasting whatever it is that you do. I think we can then sort of like go to the point that, leaders also need to embrace vulnerability. And again, we talked about psychological safety, we talked about trust, and we talked about, we don't have all of the answers. We are experimenting, and that means that leaders also need to embrace vulnerability as well, and to encourage that speaking up when things are challenging. I think, the other things are deep commitment to developing the people that they're responsible for. We've heard Bongi talking about setting a vision, communicating clear direction. But here's one area where I think leaders really need to have a mindset that is broader than their own part of the business. They need to understand how what they do impacts across the organization. There needs to be a commitment to long-term sustainability, rather than short-term goals, and really to deliver those good outcomes for customers. I mean, one of my favorite questions is, what's the unintended consequence of doing this? And I think that speaks to that new technology. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. So I think, being curious about some of the unintended consequences are really important questions for leaders to ask. And I think that really brings some of the ethics of maybe generative AI to the fore. We can use generative AI in direct customer interactions that replicate human interactions. We can create avatars that are interactive, that I can speak to. It feels like I'm speaking to an employee of the bank. But some of those ethical questions start to bubble up, which is, things like, well, what's the unintended consequence of doing that? Do you make it clear to a customer that they're interacting with AI? How do you give customers choice? So I think one of the biggest questions that leaders should be asking themselves, particularly when experimenting or trying something new, is what's the unintended consequence of doing this?
Jason, that's a really clear steer, I think, on the character of leaders. But I wonder if we might just turn back a little, Carol, to the capabilities, because obviously with change, the corollary is learning. We need to adapt, etc. I think it would be really interesting to understand where you think it's recognized that skills, capabilities are required and how they might be developed.
Yeah, and again, I think it's something that organisations are tackling every single day. So the move to a skills-based organisation will create that culture of always learning for colleagues, and they'll continually need to keep those skills up to date. No organisation can afford to sit still and be left behind, whether it's investing in the skills of their workforce, but more importantly, ensuring that colleagues are fit for the future. I have the privilege of sitting on the digital skills forum, sitting on the board of that one. And in the UK and globally, there is a digital skills gap. organisations, I think, are really struggling to go, not only do I need the skills for today, but actually what are the skills for the future? So I think that increase in self-learning led by colleagues and leaders itself, rather than relying on traditional sort of leadership programs, training programs that are delivered to them, that has got to change. So I think at the moment there's a sort of a 70-20-10 sort of learning model where 70% of learning comes from on-your-job experiences, 20% through feedback and working with role models, and maybe 10% from that more formal training. But how do you give your colleagues the ambition to want to go and change and to learn? I think traditionally people went into a career and then they stayed in that career forever and a day. You know, when I think about my own children, I've got a son at university and one doing A levels at the moment. The jobs that they're likely to go into probably haven't even been created today. Plus life expectancy, without getting too grim, you know, it's going on longer. So traditionally where people went into a career of banking and stayed there for 30-40 years, then retired, that's now gone. People are moving around, and I take myself as an example, where Bongi was mentioning earlier about we know, being able to say that we don't know all the answers ourselves, that we don't have the best answers ourselves in the room. I took a conscious decision to leave financial services and go and work in the technology industry because I recognised I didn't have that skill set. Now, do you need to move industry to do that? No, that's something I chose to do personally. I've now learned some of that skills and have brought it back into financial services. Do I think that's made myself a better leader? Absolutely. So that use of technology to bring together networks of people to create shared learning spaces. I think that coming back to that diversity in learning, appreciating people's differences by bringing people together from different viewpoints, different industries, different backgrounds to spark that fresh thinking and innovation, that will help prevent lethargy. And I think things like reverse mentoring is a great example of that. So it doesn't have to be all about technology. It can be about how we create, again, that psychological safety where colleagues aren't in fear of being marginalized when they share their thoughts, they share their ideas. All of that is that learning culture that organizations need to embrace, but with one eye on the future in terms of how do they level set what the skills that they're going to need and prepare their workforce for today.
That's super, Carol. Could I just remind the audience that we're very happy to take questions as a panel of experts. So do please feed them through. We have had one question, which I think the host will be very pleased to learn, is about how one might subscribe to the Chartered Banking Institute. I guess, Tanya, the question is what value, if I was to put it in a somewhat provocative way, what value would the CBI be able to provide in this very fluid environment with so many different dynamics? In fact, trying in some ways, to Carol's point, to prepare individuals for roles that don't yet exist.
Yeah, and it's a great question, Eric, and clearly I'm going to be very positively reacting to that response. But let's take it back a bit about, how do we as professional bodies really support? I think, the Institute's got over 35,000 members. The most important person in the room in the Institute is our members and the consumers and the clients and students and learners that we work with, because that's the way, by working alongside the industry, we can really best support people in the industry. And that's people both as individuals, so thinking about their own personal development and the way in which they can use their squiggly career path now, I think we're all used to hearing, rather than those sort of straight pencil lines, to help them think about how do they, using the words of today that we've heard, professionalize themselves, make sure they are acting responsibly, making sure that they are continuously learning in a way that actually bringing it back to that community feel actually leans into a body that works right across over 30 different countries and has, as I've just mentioned, over 30,000 members, which means the diversity of thinking, the ability to innovate, create, and actually cultivate the work in which we're trying to deliver to society is really impactful. So personally, there's a really strong ability to be able to think about yourself and your development. I think more broadly than that, as a professional body in this sector, like every sector, but I think particularly for this sector where we are very heavily regulated and we've got complexities in the way in which we manage, we also provide and support those standards in which we operate. So thinking about what does make a great professional responsible banker, how does that work right across both the UK specifically, that has its own challenges, as well as our global networks, and pulling in and working with broader global partnerships. Paul mentioned several this morning, including international educational institutes, really helps to promote standards that we'd all recognize, and also then within that, transferability of skills. So we have a rich, inclusive ability to see great professionalism across many different parts of society, many different parts of demographics. So that's really important. As an institute, we really work to support the industry, championing that innovation that we've just been describing. So thinking and using a lot of our time working with other industries around thought leadership as to actually, how does this all work together? How can we make it simpler for ourselves within the industry? Because let's face it, we can get very complex in the industry. We do like to make simple difficult sometimes. So how do we uncomplex things and make it a lot simpler for our people? But at the same time, really do think about that cut through in technology. So it makes it more efficient for everybody. And it makes it a lot easier for the customer then and society to recognize the huge benefit that the financial sector overall brings to the economy. So I think that's really important. Eric, you mentioned sustainability earlier on as well. And I think, there are emerging themes in banking that are coming through quite strongly over the last 10 years. We've talked about digital and AI as our core focus today. Sustainable finance and the way in which we organize ourselves and take that responsibility in society, I know leans into a lot of banks' core purposes now. And as an institute, that's a role we play very strongly, working with our partners, as we see around the sponsorship table today, UNEP FI particularly, and GIZ, to make sure that we've got the ability to support those emerging, I'm going to call them cross-cutting themes that actually impact every area of what an individual does now in a bank, whether they're a strategic leader or whether they're working side by side with a client in the frontline teams in branches or in retail sections. It's really important they have this ability to have those new, evolving, emerging themes. So everything we do in the Institute focuses on those core skills of banking, because let's face it, at its heart, banking hasn't changed over the last 100 years or so. We still support people to find ways of funding the things they want to do and lend money, as well as saving it as well. So fundamentally, the core skills haven't changed. But actually, as Jason's articulated, the ability for individuals to grow more broadly and have a wider range of those interpersonal skills, the empathy, the ability to think critically, actually is as important in the way in which we support in the Institute as the core qualification or professionalism does. Cross-cutted with all those sustainability, digital and AI and emerging themes, I do believe, and our members will tell us, that actually the qualifications, particularly the new simplified framework that we're now have just launched this year, really excitedly, is helping to navigate the changing landscape of banking, as it will continue to change, as we continue to find the roles for Carol's sons to make sure that they've got the future roles in banking. They are still work that we will be forever doing. The work to make sure that we're sitting alongside those emerging roles won't stop. But we help our bankers today, as well as focusing on what they do tomorrow.
Thanks. That's really helpful. One of the questions that's come through, which I'll stick with you for a moment, if I may, because you touched on it as you were speaking just a moment ago. The importance of the basic knowledge of financial services. I think you alluded to banking, money transmission, savings, and lending, etc. And I guess the question is, how important is that depth understanding of the core business model as we see these advancements in technologies? Did you want to just build on your earlier point?
Absolutely. So let me build on it from my point of view, and I'm sure my panelists, colleagues will have a view from their own perspectives. But certainly, as I say, the Institute over 149 years, 150 next year, has really developed strong educational content and professional qualifications around the core skills of banking. Feedback we see from our members and the take-up around all types of education content, whether it's our qualifications, which range right the way through from now we've got the digital and AI, but actually going back into the core responsible banking foundation qualifications, as much as our commercial skill, lending skills, and the newer ones around climate change. They are still really, really, really in demand. So core banking at its heart hasn't changed. The ability to have that foundational learning and understanding what does it truly mean to be a great professional responsible banker hasn't moved. They remain as important today to our members and to the industry as they did 100 years ago. What's important is, as we continue and move alongside our industry colleagues, is that we also recognise the changing and the emerging different trends that support the way in which they're moving and they're operating, particularly technology, absolutely technology. And that's been seen through the pull that we've had on our digital and AI certificate, but also thinking about those other cross-cutting areas as well, Eric. So from where we sit as an institute, all the playback we get, the demand we have is very much driven through core skills, and our evolving way that we operate, certainly we're refocusing and making sure that our offering supports right across that educational content.
Thanks. Now, Carol mentioned earlier the professionalism in financial services and how that's evolved. And there's an interesting question around involvement in ESG and some of the controversies, greenwashing, etc., that have arisen from that. But I think before I turn to you, Carol, I'd just like to come back to Bongi, to your purpose-driven analysis of successful organizations, because the question goes on to ask what could be done regarding global environmental concerns, and I think that is probably primarily around purpose. And Carol, then if we could just build on that point with professionalism after Bongi.
Absolutely, Eric. I think being clear on your purpose also gives you the ability to define value differently, you know, to look at it holistically, not just in terms of financial impact, but also social impact and environmental impact, and demonstrate how the interlocking of those three actually lead to a sustainable competitive advantage in the long run. Not just from the perspective of, you know, maybe a little bit of cost cutting, maybe just kind of ticking a box, but also clients are watching. Clients are becoming a lot more socially aware, a lot more environmentally aware. So they will build loyalty with organizations that stand for something beyond profit. So I think the purpose allows you to really make a choice around what you stand for, and then translate that into outcomes that touch on what matters most to the people you serve, the people who support your organization, the leaders who need to run and tell the story continuously. So I think that's where I see the connection in the balance between the different levers.
That's super. Carol, how would you view that through perhaps a lens of professionalism when you bring yourself to work?
Well, I think it's about, I guess, our obligation as financial services and I guess the communities that we serve. So I think we all have an obligation, particularly when you think about that sort of the ethical stance on it, ESG, for example. We need to make sure, for example, as organisations, that we're providing green and sustainable finance required to transform the economies that we serve. And that transition to a sustainable economy, as Bongi said earlier. It's about, that's the competitive advantage that we will all have over each other, regardless of what bank that you might work in, and obviously the customers that we're trying to attract. So I think it's a defining opportunity for innovation, for growth. And I think, I think about Barclays, we've got a really important role in helping channel that investment, including our own capital into new green technologies, for example, low carbon infrastructure. So you can't just walk away from organisations just because they've always done things in a certain way. We need to help upskill industry and organisations and help them invest in the future so that we are more professional, so that we are more ethical. And I think we've all got a role to play in making sure that we support the economies that we serve every single day.
Thanks, Carol. That's super helpful. Jason, if I was to turn to you, interesting question. If you had to select learning categories, what would your priorities be? And Tanya, don't feel that you're being left out here. We'll come to you and perhaps the prospectus for CBI in a shameless marketing pitch in the course of this conversation. But seriously, Jason, time is precious. People don't have the same amount of I guess, resource that they can dedicate to their training, and CPD is sometimes a sort of an add-on towards the end of the year. Where would you focus your efforts?
Look, that is a great question. It's a question I'm asked a lot. I am going to build on Tanya's earlier answer, because what I would ask for people in the conference to think about is a Venn diagram, and there are three components to this Venn diagram. There are interpersonal skills in one circle, there are technical skills in a second circle, and there is banking expertise in a third circle. And if you look for where are organizations and individuals going to win, it is at the intersection between all three. So I think it is really important that you are looking at developing your interpersonal skills, your technical skills, and your banking expertise at the same time. And you can do that. I think it was Carol who was talking about the 70-20-10 learning model. And again, I would strongly encourage for people to think about, Google this. If you're not familiar with it, you could just Google this principle. And ultimately, if you just think for a moment of all the things that you know and can do right now, and then ask yourself, well, where did I learn that? Around 70% of it has come from on-the-job experience, as Carol told us. 20% was just through conversations with that, and only 10% was formal learning. So if you start to think about, as we start to head into 2025, lots of you will be thinking about setting some goals for personal development. If you're only ever thinking about formal learning, then you're only going to be extracting around 10%. So every day you can just try something different. You can build your curiosity to say, how else might this be done? And that falls into that 70%. So it's in the flow of work. I think a lot of development can be done in the flow of work. But if you're looking at what are the really key interpersonal skills, it is going to be empathy. It is going to be curiosity. It is going to be adaptability. It is going to be customer relationships or relationship management. Those are kind of the big four, because they're the things that AI can't do for us. It's that wisdom versus intelligence. And you can amp those up. I'm sure you're all working for organizations that have their own learning management system, but also don't lose sight of podcasts, of content that's through LinkedIn, on the Chartered Banker website. You can just absorb this little and often rather than making it a really big deal. I think that would be the key around interpersonal and technical. Yeah, again, look, the pace of technology is moving so fast. So as soon as you've learned something, probably the following day it's out of date. So again, it is very much little and often, and use aggregators to sort of compress your news feed. You can set up Google alerts for news articles that will automatically, you can use AI to your advantage. You can use these tools to say every morning or every week, I just want an aggregation of articles on these subjects, and then you can kind of pick and choose. But I think for me, the biggest piece of advice that I give to people is just to carve out at least 15 minutes a week, just to reflect on what am I developing in, and actually time lock that in your diary at a time in your week where for me, it's Thursday mornings. I have a 15-minute appointment with myself every Thursday morning. And it's just to reflect on what am I doing in my development, because the pace of life gets in the way of development. And if I haven't got that appointment in my diary, it can be weeks. And I suddenly realize I haven't been purposefully developing. So that they would be my top tips, Eric.
Jason, I think that's a very valid caution against drift. There's so many other things that get in the way. And as I alluded to earlier, as it comes round to the year-end appraisals, that is just not the time to be visiting that personal development plan that you carved out at the start of the year. Tanya, interestingly, how could a CBI qualification help me? I think it'd be really useful, and clearly this isn't a sales pitch, but I think it would be really useful to help those in the conference to understand what resources are available for members and non-members alike. And I'm assuming that the step through would be the website.
Thank you, Eric. And actually, Jason, I thought set this up beautifully for me. So thank you, Jason, because it is really important that you take that step back to consider what is it that you're trying to achieve and what's your goals through all of this. And there are so many different layers and lenses that you can apply to your own learning. You have to have some clarity around what it is that you're looking for. So firstly, I'm going to pick up slightly differently rather than qualification, but I'm just going to pick up on something Jason said around the website and the availability of actually various different podcasts, webinars, and playbacks for many non-members. You don't have to be a member to access our core website, but we do offer a number of different ways in which you can connect through different subjects, which will really support whether you're looking at it through the lens of your own interpersonal skills, or whether it's more in the deeper specialist areas that you want to have more breadth in. Because actually through the website, you'll find that we do provide support to actually articulate, well, where are my skill sets as opposed to what I've got today, and where are some of those gaps that I want to be heading towards. So some really good ways to assess your own skill levels, and also to give some great career guidance is available through our website. So probably not the most well-known area of what we provide, but I thought I'd start there. We do, and we've talked a lot about communities and working together and providing that ability to exchange information and knowledge. So we do have really strong membership groupings where we actually see the teams and the forums and the meeting groups get together virtually and face-to-face to be able to do some of that community of practice sharing. It's a really great way to interact with people in the industry. So being able to do that again allows you to be able to broaden your own personal development, as well as lean into all those great things that we said sharing and communities of practices provide. Equally, obviously, as we start to step in then into more sort of content availability, we do have continuous professional development available. This starts to get into membership as well as non-membership areas, Eric, but equally, a lot of the free webinars, podcasts, and playbacks are all great continuous professional development. And for members, numbers of our members need these and like to use these as part of their daily routine, as Jason's just described, to tap into to get just some updates and some quick downloads. And most of these, again, are all available whether you're on the go or whether you're sitting at a desk. So pop your earpods in and listen to it on the bus on the way to work. It's quite a nice way to use your time well. As we step into content, though, we do provide considerable, extensive ranges of educational content. I think what's really important to bring out here in relation to everything we said today is that the content and the way that the newer qualifications particularly have been developed over the last couple of years is really mindful and thoughtful around how we actually help people to apply the learning and use those skills themselves of personal development, as well as learning the knowledge and the technical areas. So, for example, you know, those core areas of critical thinking, thinking about change, empathy, with asking those questions through the learning. So it's actually getting people to start using those types of skills as they are in the learning and in the flow of the learning. So whether that's in the e-learning or whether that's in some of just the content papers, there's good ways in which you can actually explore and develop your own personal interpersonal skills as well. But of course, listen, you know, our big areas where we do get lots of focus is our qualifications. Core skills is a really key subject for us. Our professional banking certificate, which goodness, has been around for a number of years now, was refreshed in 2023. It's a really, really popular, grounding, foundational cornerstone for anybody's banking career, whether you've been in for a long time or whether you're just starting. It really does help you to get your fingers around and an understanding of the breadth of the industry and the sector that you're working in. And off the back of that, our new flexible framework actually allows you to work alongside your career to pick and choose a pathway to demonstrate that professionalism through our qualification at Associate Chartered Banker, which is the diploma level, as well as giving you professional designations to be able to show people actually you take the time and you are really, really passionate about your own development and ability to help your customers in a professional way. So you can use that to move into our chartered banker status, which we know globally is a really transferable asset to have to your name and something that demonstrates that you've taken the time to show and demonstrate your ability in banking. So a really flexible pathway. I know we saw a brief show of it earlier on at the very beginning, but it's now in our website for you to have a look at. And within that, we've got some of those core qualifications I've mentioned already: digital and AI, we've got sustainable banking, we've got new commercial lending and a commercial and corporate banking environment coming out later this year and early into next year, as well as something, Carol, you mentioned earlier on. You know, we've had continuous professional development around consumer duty, but it's an area of continual change, and there's a short certificate coming out to help people's knowledge gap as we go through later this year. So I guess, Eric, you know, overall, there's a vast array of ways in which, as an institute, we can support our members. Let's not least forget as well, members and organisations that work alongside us. So we can help support internationally. We can make sure through our thought leadership, we are really lobbying with the sector to make sure that we're getting fair outcomes for our customers, as well as really supporting the development and the professionalism of those that work in it.
Thank you, Tanya. And I think I would just build by saying that there are, when we think of technology, the technology innovation is happening all around us in all sorts of different walks of life, industry sectors, etc. And to the 70-20-10 rule, I think we might all be a little surprised when we think of perhaps the technology that's now available in everyday motor cars. You know, our familiarity with that helps, I think, point to other areas or other industries and other disciplines where we could learn a thing or two. So there's a broad, I think a broader answer to the question, but certainly that was very comprehensive on the professional qualifications that the CBI might offer. We're running to the last few minutes, I think, of this session. So do please, if you have a burning question, do type it up so that we can pose it to the panel. I think one particular aspect when I consider the consideration of the application of technology relative to people development and professionalism equally in different markets, and how it has been hugely supportive. It's very beneficial links to a genuine purpose-led organization, etc. Across the various points that we have discussed, I feel that we have really covered a lot of hopefully very helpful ground. But there's one question I think that we must ask ourselves, and I'll put it briefly to all of you, is how do we help those left behind? How do we help those that don't have the confidence, perhaps don't have the access, perhaps there isn't the infrastructure, regardless of the technology, the tablet, the individual, or the competence they might have? I think I'd be interested just to hear a very brief perspective from each of you on what we should be thinking about as organizations and as society in that space. Bongi, did you want to start us off?
Sure, I will. The short answer is intentionally. There are some people who will be reluctant, a little bit nervous, and in those contexts, another human giving them the confidence, to build the trust, and that they're not going to break anything and lose everything by starting to use an app, is important. I sometimes like to think of my career as equivalent to teaching my grandmother how to use WhatsApp. You know what I mean? Lots of patience, intentional, but so valuable when they get it right. So there'll be natural gravitation towards it for certain sectors, and then some clients not. So patience, intentionality, and where there are kind of physical barriers, creatively solving them with the people. Sometimes we think we have all the answers and I'm coming to save you, but just by working with communities to try and see what are some of the short-term wins that'll help us to kind of build the type of infrastructure that we'll need is also a great idea.
Bongi, thank you. Carol.
This is something I'm so passionate about, because I believe that no one should be left behind. So I think we all have a duty to pay it forward, as I would call it. So when I think about the people that have been generous enough with me over the years with their advice, their skills, their support, I think we could all take some of our own time to help with that. But organisations in total, in terms of, again, in my career, I had the privilege of leading the Digital Eagles in Barclays. We taught 50,000 children how to code. We spent lots of time, particularly during COVID, helping people in care homes learning how to use iPads so they could connect with their family. So Bongi teaching her grandmother how to use WhatsApp. I feel your pain on that one, Bongi, particularly. And I think it goes across the generations. In the questions, there's lots of people on there saying, well, actually, I'm sort of, I'm over the age of 50. So much skills and experience that we could, if we match the younger generation to people of a more mature generation, what you get is something very, very beautiful. So again, it comes back to that diversity that I was talking about earlier, that reverse mentoring. I think we can all play a part in society to help each other out, understand what it's like to be in the shoes of that particular person, their experience, and learn from it. And I think using technology and helping people with technology to help connect people all across the world, it doesn't even have to be in your own town. It's just beautiful. And when it works beautifully.
Carol, thank you. We are hard against the clock, so with 10 seconds apiece, I'll turn to Jason very quickly. What builds might you have?
So I think one size does not fit all. It's about personalization. You can't just deliver one thing and expect everyone to keep up. You need to embrace personalization to bring everybody on the journey with you.
Fantastic. And Tanya, the very last word.
Communities. Diversity of thinking. Let's work together.
Brilliant. Now, I think on behalf of the audience, it falls to me to say a sincere thank you to you all as panelists. I found that really insightful session. Hopefully, it has given plenty of food for thought. It's opened avenues. It's identified opportunities for personal development, thoughts around leadership, around organizations, around the evolving HR landscape as well. And I would very much commend that we have somewhat filled the brief that this session intended to achieve. So thank you, panelists, on behalf of the audience. And audience, I do hope that you too have enjoyed this session. And I think at this point, I hand back to the CBI team who will continue the conference. But thank you also from my part for providing me with such great questions to pose to the panelists that made the session so productive. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.